I'll do it. Don't try not to yell right into the microphone.
Right there?
Yeah.
Testing. 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
With your good, strong voice, you don't think,
Hey!
Okay.
Right. Oh shit, I've used all your paper, mate.
Jarvis, test mic. Test mic 2. I'll stand here and speak. We have, good evening ladies and gentlemen, we have 9 minutes to live. We're going live in 9 minutes. I'm just doing a mic check. Good, 2, 1, 2, 3. Okay, you can have it. It's all yours if you know.
no way from idea. Put up the bell.
Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2.
If I can just call to order the Mission Bay branch of the Tāmaki Neoliberal Support Group. Welcome. My name is Jordan and I am a taxpayer. This is an unusual debate for the Taxpayers Union in that we only have two lefties in the room. I see Simon's here and Bomber's floating around. We did invite Labor, but they didn't return our calls or emails, and I suggested to Callum that in Taxpayer Union style we should get someone in a chicken suit to sit in the seat, and Callum said, Jordan, that would be very inappropriate. It would make us look a bit discredited and a bit silly, and Labor beat us to it. So we're not using the chicken suit tonight. I'm sorry, the intern can say in the debt clock. We have a great evening tonight. If we can have the candidates up the front, because do we have we Simon? Shit, it's.
That's an easy day.
It's like, where's Waldo? Where's the other guy in the blue? Oh well. I was going to say on the right of me we have Simon, which is true in one way. China fears him the most. They banned him. He is the hardest working electorate MP. Day or night, rain or shine, even on the day of the Sabbath, he takes the calls from the boss of the Taxpayers Union as a local constituency. And I just think it is wonderful that someone else wants that job for us to be calling. So again, I never get to say this. Also on the right of me is we have Brooke. Brooke was so feared by the economics department at her university, she had to go and work for Matthew Hooton because they asked her to find another use of her occupation. We've all have jobs we regretted. Just ask anyone who's been in Quay, for example. From there, she went to work for David Seymour and then applied for another job as a ACT MP. What I was going to say, if Simon does arrive... Oh, here he is. Great. Yep. It is always a huge ask for people to put themselves forward at events like this and put themselves for the judgment of our peers and stand for Parliament. A quick note from our sponsors, because it is true, we are among friends. Simon, block your ears. We are funded by Big Taxpayer. And one of those big taxpayers is Damien Grant and Gravity Credit Management, who are a sponsor tonight. Damien will be co-hosting. Welcome, Damien. And I mentioned there was another lefty in the room, Martyn Bomber Bradbury. I'm sorry, mate. We did our best. Poor Martyn, we had to explain where Mission Bay was because it's not his usual hangout. Final thing is there's a couple of rules. Interjections are encouraged. This isn't a Super Blues event, but nor is it an ACT conference. We want interjections as long as they are witty. The first prize there is a prize for the best witty comment. Unfortunately, it's a ram raid. And afterwards, by all means, come and have a look at the debt clock. It's going up $820 a second. And for whichever MP is not fortunate enough to be the future or the next MP of Tāmaki, don't forget Robbo's Removals, 0800 Tax Flee. Call my mate, Grant Robinson. Chippy and Robbo will sort you out. Thanks very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the greatest NZ live political podcast in the world, The Working Group, Hosted by beloved left-wing broadcaster Comrade Bomber Bradbury. With the best political panel in New Zealand media.
Why are there so
Reviewing the
many blue
week,
people?
setting the agenda, avoiding defamation. The Working Group is brought to you by Gravity Credit Management. When the weight of capitalism is becoming the event horizon of an imploding black hole, call 0800 Gravity, and our team will get blood out of a stone. That's 0800 Gravity. This is the Working Group.
Kia ora Aotearoa. This is the Taxpayers Union 2023 election debate series coming live from the palatial Good George on Tāmaki Drive in the mighty Auckland electorate of Tāmaki. Good evening, everyone. Hosted by the Working Group, New Zealand's best weekly political podcast that isn't funded by New Zealand On Air. I am your host this evening, editor of the daily blog, Martyn Bradbury, and joining me tonight is my podcast permanent panellist, the 132nd most important libertarian columnist at Stuff, Damien Grant.
I think Martyn.
Don't encourage him. We are streaming live tonight.
We are the only political podcast not funded by New Zealand.
Yeah, I think we are the only one. We are.
one.
That is absolutely true. We're streaming live tonight on the Daily Blog, the Taxpayers Union, Facebook and YouTube, and simulcast on Juice TV, Freeview 200. This is our final live debate for this election season. We've been to Napier, Ilam, Northland, Wellington and Auckland to bring you more debate because this country needs to learn how to argue without cancelling everyone or home invading candidates. Brothers and sisters, fellow New Zealanders, comrades and citizens, thank you for tuning into this most important of civic duties, which is to vote. In an age of disinformation, misinformation and apathy, our democracy needs engaged citizens like never before. Let's ensure that tonight we are passionate in our debate and righteous in our argument because there are only 100 democracies on earth and we are blessed to be one of them. Tonight we will debate the ideas while respecting the individual because no matter how you vote, we are all citizens and we all shake hands after the arguing. So before we begin, a toast, fellow citizens, to our democracy and long may we debate it. To democracy! Right, let's get into the buggers. Tonight we have one-on-one debate between the right wing and the really right wing. For left-wing viewers, tonight's debate will be more akin to a death cage match between Lord Voldemort and a Dalek. In that, you aren't sure who you want to cheer for, but you hope they both kill each other. The New Zealand right are going through a once-in-a-generation demographic change between the old-school conservatives and the new young right, and nowhere is that battle more clear than in Tāmaki. Tonight, we will probe each candidate on issues that are confronting this electorate and the nation. We aren't just interested in their promises to Tāmaki, we are interested in how they will provide leadership on the big issues confronting New Zealand. And right now, from tonight's poll, the issues tonight will be law and order, Issue 2, cost of living, Issue 3, the economy, and Issue 4, climate change. After I have quizzed you on each of these topics, Damien will challenge your answers. At the end of the debate, I will ask where we as a country are going, and each candidate will get 60 seconds to answer where they think the country is going and how voting for them and their party will impact that direction. Seeing as there are no left-wing candidates tonight, I, unfortunately, will have to be extra more biased than usual in my questioning. So, if you at home have a problem with that, contact the Broadcasting Standards Authority and I'll tell them what I'm about to tell all these nice people here. I've already been paid, so I don't care. Before we introduce our candidates and invite them to give us their opening statements, I'd like to invite Callum from the Taxpayers Union to come to the stage and present us with the all-important courier polling for Tāmaki. Ladies and gentlemen, Callum.
Thank you. So just before we get into the poll results, a very little bit of background about the Tāmaki electorate. Since its creation in 1946, the seat has been won by the National Party in all bar 2 elections, and it has been blue continuously since the former Prime Minister Robert Muldoon won it at the 1960 election, before going on to represent the seat for 32 years. The incumbent here, National MP Simon O'Connor, was first elected in 2011. Despite the high Labour tide at the 2020 election, Simon still managed to secure over 50% of the vote in that election, with his candidate vote being 15 points higher than the Nationals' party vote in that election. Back in April, however, ACT Party Deputy Leader Brooke van Velden announced her intention to contest the seat and win a second electorate for her party. And our poll results today and the debate will give us an idea of how likely she is to fulfil that ambition. So, if we move on to looking at the results of the poll, this poll was conducted. Oh, great. Here we go. That could have been awkward. This poll was conducted by Courier Market Research on behalf of the New Zealand Taxpayers Union over 4 separate days between Monday the 18th and Thursday the 28th of September. 409 respondents agreed to participate from a random sample of 5,000 landline or mobile phone numbers in the Tāmaki electorate, and the results have been weighted for age and for gender. Now, let's look at country direction. It's a good idea of what people here in the Tāmaki electorate think about the future of New Zealand. So starting with the number of people who think that New Zealand's heading in the wrong direction, 76%. Those who think New Zealand is heading in the right direction, 15%. And 9% were unsure. Now that gives us a net country direction of minus 61%. That's by far the worst score we have seen in all of our electorate polls over this series of debates, and considerably worse than the nationwide results from September's Taxpayer Union Courier poll of minus 36%. So it's clear that people in Tāmaki really aren't happy with the current government. The question rather is what that alternative should look like. We also asked people what was the most important local issue to them here in Tāmaki and whether that would affect how they're going to vote. So as in Auckland Central, the top issue was law and order on 28%, followed by the cost of living on 21%, the economy more generally on 11%, climate change on 7%, others cumulatively on 7%, unsure, 5% of people were unsure, 5% for health, 4% for public transport, 3% for housing, 3% for education, 2% for co-governance, 2% for roading, 2% for local council, and 1% for COVID-19. Now, we've not got long to get through this. If we move on to party vote, the primary determinant of the composition of Parliament, so starting with all voters, National is on 46% here in Tāmaki, Labour on 19%, ACT on 13%, the Greens on 8%, colour's wrong there, 4% for New Zealand First, 2% for TOP, 2% for others, 5% were unsure, which is a lot lower than we've seen in our previous electorate polls, perhaps as people are firming up in their minds which way they're going to go, and 1% refused. So if we remove the refused and unsure, we get our decided voter score, National there on 49%, that's up 12 points on 2020. Labour on 20, that's down 18 points. ACT on 14, up 2. The Greens on 8, unchanged. New Zealand First on 4, up 2, and TOP on 2, up 1, others on 3. So that's a two-party swing from Labour to National of 15 points. Now we also asked whether people could name the electorate MP and the ACT and Labour candidates in Tāmaki. So starting with the Labour candidate, 9% could correctly identify the Labour candidate, 89% said they couldn't, 2% tried but got it wrong. For Brooke, 53% were able to correctly identify her. That's the joint best we've seen in our electorate polls for a non-incumbent MP. 45% weren't able to identify or didn't try to, and 2% tried but got it wrong. Then for Simon, 63% of people could correctly identify him, which is a good score at the upper end of the 50 to 70% range we would look at for an incumbent, and the best we've seen in the electorate polls that we've done this year. 32% didn't try. And 5% think they're represented by someone else. So we also asked for the seats where we have incumbent MPs standing for re-election, how they think their MP has performed over the last year. So starting with very poor, 13% of voters thought Simon had done a very poor job. 16% thought he'd done a poor job. Average, 24%. Good, 19%. Very good, 11%. Unsure, 17%. So if we add the very poor and poor together and take that from the good and very good, we get a net MP approval rating of positive 1%. This score is kind of middle in the pack. It's better than the two Labour MPs for whom we've asked the same question, who had scores of minus 15% and minus 36. But not as good as the score we saw for Chloe Swarbrick last week of positive 15%. And now to the result that we're all waiting for, the electorate vote for Tāmaki. So we prompted for the names of the 4 candidates for National, ACT, Labour and the New Zealand Loyal Party. Starting with all voters, Simon is on 35%. Brooke is on 33%. Fesetu is on 12%. Now, this is where we get to the stage where people, despite the fact we tell them there aren't candidates for these parties, still insist on telling us that they're going to vote for those parties. So we have 4% for the Greens, 2% for the Māori Party, and 1% for New Zealand First. 13% were unsure, slightly higher than for the party vote, and 1% refused. Now, if we take out the refused and undecideds, we get our decided voter score, the closest approximation of what we might see on the night at the moment. And that's National on 40%, down 12 points on 2020. ACT on 38%, that's up 30 points on 2020. Labour on 14%, that's down 18 points. And our fictional candidates now, 4% for the Greens, 2% for Te Pāti Māori, and 1% for New Zealand First. So that represents a two-party swing from National to ACT of 21 points. So what does this result mean? The 2-point difference between Simon and Brooke is well within the margin of error for this poll, which is 4.9%. And as such, the two are locked in a statistical tie. Just before we conclude, let's look at how people are voting this time in their electorate vote based on their 2020 electorate vote. So starting with Labour, as we've seen in other electorates, their voter retention rate is very poor. 1 in 5 of their voters from 2020 are now planning to support Simon. Fesetu is managing to hold on to about 2 in 5, while 11% are going for Brooke, and 15% for the Greens, 13% are undecided. Then if we look at ACT, now this is quite a small sample because they only got 8% last time, that they have the strongest voter retention rate, as you might expect, with Brooke holding on to 80% of, roughly 80% of their 2020 voters. And the most interesting result, I suppose, is the national 2020 voters. So how many of Simon's voters plan to vote for him again a week on Saturday? And that's 50%, so half are still planning to vote for Simon. Then 1% for Labour, and for Brooke, 43% of 2020 national voters, and 5% remain undecided. So in summary, after a lot of speculation about Tāmaki and whether ACT really has a good chance of unseating National here, the answer is, of course, yes. There is a two-horse race here between Simon and Brooke that is too close to call and within the margin of error. So our results of our poll show a statistical tie, and it could come down to a handful of votes next week. The full results, as always, are available on our website. Thank you.
Wow, 40 to 38%. Wow, Simon, an 8,000 majority up in smoke just like that. Now you know what it feels like to be the Labour Party. There is everything to win it, ladies and gentlemen. Let us begin tonight's event by introducing our invited candidates to this evening's live stream simulcast TV debate from the National Party, Simon O'Connor. From the ACT Party, Brooke van Velden. Welcome to you both. Let's start tonight with an opening 1 minute from each of you on your vision for Tāmaki and New Zealand. Simon, your 1 minute vision for Tāmaki and New Zealand, please.
Well, that's good. All right. Well, the first is there's clearly some work to do if 15% of this electorate still think that Labor's okay and 9% don't. So clearly part of my vision, Martyn, has to be get out even more and knock on more doors. But fundamentally my vision is to be the man that I've been for 12 years, which is a local who lives in this community with his family and serves the community every day to make sure everything is needed to be done to make this country great, but most importantly, to make Tāmaki continue to be the wonderful place it is. So ultimately, it's about being local, it's about being experienced, and about being a man of service. And that entails helping this amazing electorate. It's what I love doing, and will continue to do it.
Rock, your 1 minute vision for Tāmaki and New Zealand, please.
Hi, I'm Brooke. Look, I believe that Tāmaki is a beautiful place, but can I get a show of hands? How many people here want to see a change of government? Yeah? So do I. I really, really do. But look, I'm standing in Tāmaki because I'm an advocate and I love what I do. But over the past few years, many people from our community here have asked me to be an advocate for Tāmaki. They've said, we feel underserved. This has been a national seat for 63 years. And it means that people haven't had choice. And all I'm doing this year is to bring choice to the people of Tāmaki. There have been a few things on people's minds when I've been out door knocking and been out conducting 120 street corner meetings in these past few months. Crime. People feel really unsafe. You know, you think of the Ōrākei local shops being ram raided a fortnight ago. You think of Long Drive and the Caltex being ram raided just this week. There is lawlessness on our streets and that has to stop. And so I'm here to bring choice and advocacy to Tāmaki.
Let's start with the main issue Tāmaki voters are concerned about, and it's crime. Post-COVID, New Zealand has been terrified by ram-raiding youth and 501 syndicates starting turf wars for the meth trade. It costs $200,000 per year to keep a prisoner in prison, an actor promising $1 billion more on prisons, while National will ban all gang patches in public. Candidates, you have 60 seconds to answer each of my questions, followed by a question from Damien based on your answers, which you will have a right of reply to. Simon, let me see if I can get this completely straight. National, in their first 100 days, will ban gang patches, and when challenged on how National intend to police that patch ban, your leader, Christopher Luxon, told Paddy Gower that he will send in the police at a 500-strong gang tangi and force confrontation. Critics point out you will need 1,500 heavily armed paramilitary police to enter a 500-strong gang funeral, and that this type of policing will result in bloodshed. Can you explain to the good people of Tāmaki why starting shootouts at gang funerals is going to make anyone safer under a National Act New Zealand First government? Your time starts now. Your time starts now.
Well, the good news is, Bomber, that actually gang patches are worn at more than just funerals. So, and seeing we had a whole lot of gang members who turned up years ago at Dame Thea's funeral, they do turn up to those places, but also if you've been around here, you see them going down Tāmaki Drive, you see them congregating behind us. There are many other places our police can interdict them, and they will. because National is committed to dealing to them. And if you know our local police like I do, they want to do this. They want to be released to do their jobs.
They want to go to a gang-tangi. Okay. Follow-up question. In 2016-2017, the 12-month recidivism rate was 46.8%, while the 24-month rate was 60.9%. The latest rates for 21-22 show these falling to 35.8% and 56.5% respectively. Labor's prison policy is bringing recidivism down, yet National want to remove judicial independence, cultural reports and mercy so that prisons are harder and tougher and cause more suffering. All your prison policy will do is take damaged men and release even more damaged men, won't it? Your time starts now.
Well, good thing for me, maybe not so much for yourself, as I was a prison chaplain at the old Mount Eden for a while, and the fact is that prison can actually serve a rehabilitative approach. And at the moment, yep, there's fewer people in prison. Calvin's let them out. We actually say this is a chance to make interventions. It's a chance to make interventions, to make a change. And it won't help all, but it will help some. And also, I don't care how people want to slice and dice the numbers. If, like me, you live in this community, you know things are much, much, much worse now than ever before.
Damien?
What year were you, like you, I've had some experience at Mount Eden. What years were you a prison chaplain there?
It was in the late 90s in the old Mount Eden. I'd have to.
It.
Yep. I was mainly down what you'd have known. Well, hopefully you wouldn't have been there in the old D block. And don't take this the wrong way. The youth yards. That's where I spent most of my time. So yeah, that was in the late 90s, and a place you never wanted to be. There's just something as you step into that old Mount Eden and the door clangs behind you, and you're just, even as someone who knows he's going to get out, it's just not a good place. Not a good place.
You are preaching to the choir.
Oh, yeah. You could ask for a show of hands who's been to Mount Eden.
Like you, I have convictions.
Double entendre, people. Double entendre.
So, okay, let's start with gang patches. All right. My first question is, how do you define a gang? Give me a working definition of a gang.
Yeah, look, I think you're actually raising a good question in the wider philosophical sense, is that you want to be really clear in legislation of who's in and out. And most of us could anecdotally sit right here now and go, of course, the likes of Mongrel Mob, Black Power, of course, Killer Bees fits it, but actually there's the Ulysses Riding Club, for example. They wear patches, and they're not a gang in the same sense. But we feel that particularly referencing off the likes of the National Gang Register, the Intelligence Unit, we can be quite specific by naming what the gangs are and consequently their patches.
But how do you get onto that? Because there's like 8,000 names now on that National Gang Register. What is the process by which a person's name is added, and what is the process, most importantly, that name is removed? Because that seems to me a highly arbitrary measure. So you're saying the definition of a gang is if you're on the Police National Gang Register, you belong to a gang?
Well, again, I think most of us can anecdotally define what a gang is. How we're going to...
Anecdotal definition.
Yeah.
I'm asking for a legal definition that can be enforced on the streets of Tāmaki.
Well, I have the confidence that we'll be able to do it. I'm not a trained lawyer, so I'd be wrong. I'd be convicted in the wrong way to try and define it for you here today, but I'm quite convinced we are able to define it. And as to the element around how they get onto that intelligence, I don't think that's probably very prudent for me to answer here in public.
So let's just take a gang patch. So this would be a gang patch. So if I was wearing this out there, you would say this is a criminal organisation, and I would be in trouble if I was to be wearing it?
Most likely.
Okay,
You've got to give me the alternative.
Is that your normal mufti wear, Damien?
I mean, what about this one? Is this a criminal organisation? It says pretty, because the definition of what is a criminal organisation.
Jack Tay might have a view on that.
Very quickly, doesn't it?
Oh, look, the slippery slope argument is one that quite genuinely does worry me in these spaces, and I'm certainly one of the MPs who often advocates that we need good clear laws and consistency, because what you're hinting at is actually if we can take the 3, 4, 5, whatever number of criminal gangs, what's going to stop a future government sliding that out a little bit further? So you're raising exceptionally good questions, but that's the whole point. As I've been in 12 years of Parliament, these are the things we interrogate in Select Committee, and we draft it as clearly as we can.
Thank you, Simon. Brooke. If Winston's watching, I'm not legally connected to this show. Brooke, critics would say your party is beholden to the gun lobby group, that you will ban, that you're so beholden to the gun lobby group, you will ban the gun registry and allow submachine guns back on the streets. Other than in the Ukraine, more submachine guns aren't generally an answer in a liberal progressive democracy. How is more submachine guns for sale in New Zealand going to make Tāmaki safer?
I think you'll find that Labor still allow those sorts of guns to be
But you want to lift the ban, right? You want to lift the ban on those submachine guns and they will be sold. You're not going to lift that ban.
The law already exists that people can have those sorts of weapons if that's what they have. Look, we want to have sensible firearm laws. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that I'm not a firearms person. But what I am is a person who believes in good public policy, Bomber. You know, I don't think that the firearms register is actually going to help get gun violence and gang violence off our streets, and that's where we need to focus on. Anybody who's a law-abiding firearms owner is going to put their firearm on a register, but people who are doing the bad stuff, the bad guys, the gangs, they're not going to put their guns onto a register. So what we've got to do is make sure that the law works and says if there's been a crime that's committed and it's by someone who's in a gang and there's a firearm on the scene, we should be able to search and seize all of that person's assets, because not only do you get those illegal firearms off the streets and out of circulation and they're in the hands of bad guys doing the wrong things, you also go after all of the proceeds of crime and make it really unprofitable to be in a gang. So we've got to hit them where it hurts. That helps us get away from proceeds of crime, which is what a lot of young kids see, and they think that's cool to be in a gang, and it gets illegal firearms out of circulation. But I don't think it's right to go after people who are law-abiding, like our farmers who use them for their work.
The Police Association has a different opinion on banning the gun registry, but follow-up question, won't crippling judicial oversight by changing the sentencing laws so that anger and fear from victims can be injected into our sentences create vengeance rather than justice? And won't that generate an enormous jump in the prison population for emotional reasons rather than objective reasons?
No, I don't think so. I think what we've got to do is rebalance our sentencing laws to say that, look, as citizens of New Zealand, we have a right to feel safe on our streets. And no matter where I go in Tāmaki, people do not feel safe, whether that's at the local shops or it's parents I talk to who don't even let their kids go and ride their bikes at the local parks, or you've got dairy owners who are actually really afraid to even go to work. You know, we should have a right to not be victims. And so when we're creating our laws that say, look, you've done the wrong thing, you should do the time, I think we've got to make sure that judges are looking at the rights of victims and the rights of community safety when they're issuing their sentence decisions. I think that's the sensible thing to do, put victims at the centre.
Damien?
Your victim reparations things includes making the state liable for those reparations, right? So if somebody is given an order to repay a victim, if I'm reading the Act policy correctly, that is going to come from the state coffers.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, what we have at the moment, we've got people who are the victims of crime, and part of the sentence might be that they to be paid back by the offender. But a lot of those offenders will drip feed payments, maybe $5, $10 a week for 30 years. That means as a victim, you're being re-victimised every single time that money's coming into your account. We want to make sure that we're putting the victims first, and so the government will pay out your reparation, and then the offender has to pay back the government, because I think it's important, you know, in the case of someone who's, you know, a domestic violence survivor, someone who's been severely attacked, that they can actually have the ability to remove themselves from the offender, re-victimising them.
Wait, there's more. That the specific area of the pot of money you've identified is the Proceeds of Crime Act. Now, you are comfortable with the way the Proceeds of Crime Act is currently being used?
Well, in some ways, I'm not comfortable with the way that the Proceeds of Crime Fund is being used. You know, I was talking to a addictions facility at the end of last year, and they were hoping to actually have access to some of this funding because they used to have access to this funding, but then it stopped. And so at the moment, the Proceeds of Crime Fund should be there to help people who have been victims of crime and to stop crime. That facility had to close. And so there was a meth addictions facility that had to close because the government wouldn't allow them to use that funding again. I think we should be using that funding for the victims of crime, and I think a very good use of that funding is to help pay for people so they're not re-victimised by their offenders.
Because one of the areas, when I look at the Proceeds of Crime Act, I look at what is happening in the Salter Cartage case, which is an absolute shocking abuse of state power, where the state has turned around to Salter's Carters and says, because you have breached health and safety laws, the state is currently seeking to expropriate 100% of its assets built up over a 20-year period. That is a case that I am aware of because it's been in the media. I am sure that there are others. Wouldn't it be a better policy to actually take the proceeds, because the problem with something like the Proceeds of Crime Act, it's like the Productivity Commission and the Human Rights Commission. It starts off with the best of intentions and then is corrupted and abused by dishonest actors acting for their own self-interest and not the greater good of the community. Wouldn't it be better just to end this pernicious piece of legislation? And if you want reparations, then that should come out of the general taxpayer revenue.
Well, I think you could probably find various forms of places to find revenue for reparations of crime. But what I think is important is that where we have proceeds of crime, that they do go back to victims, because we have to be victim-centric in our justice system. If you think of, our policy about getting the illegal firearms off the street, getting the illegal profits off the streets and out of the hands of gang members through our policy, that money could easily go into a slush fund for the reparations of crime.
Quick round question to both of you on law and order. Your future coalition partner, Winston Peters, could not answer how much his prison policy would cost during an angry interview with Jack Tame on TVNZ over the weekend, where Winston ended up threatening Jack's job. Two quick questions. One, shouldn't your future coalition partner know the cost of his own prison policy? And two, would you allow your future coalition partner to sack Jack Tame for doing his job? Simon?
Start in reverse, no, and we won't allow him to sack you from doing your job either. And the other third...
Jesus.
And the other part of it, ultimately, it's going to cost money to put people into prisons. It comes back to what I said earlier. It's about how you spend that money to actually transform their lives and protect our community.
Thank you. Brooke? Shouldn't Winston know his policy costs?
Yeah, but to be honest, is anybody really listening to Winston?
Well, no,
about 4.9% of the population, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, Brooke, they are listening to him, which is...
To your question, though, about coalitions, ACT and National have been very clear, and I want to be clear as well, that I want to work tightly with National to form the next government. It should be our two parties. ACT and National is a tight, stable coalition, around the cabinet table. That's what people need.
So you're ruling out
Winston?
Winston?
That's what people should vote for.
Tonight?
No, what I'm saying is we have to deal... No, it's an important point. We have to deal with the cards that
Because you're working really well with the National Act thing here tonight, hey? Just putting it out there.
Well, no, that's a very different question, Simon. I'm talking about us needing to have a strong, stable, united coalition, and that's the party vote. Only the party vote creates the change of government, and that's what I want everybody in this room and who might be listening to recognise. If you want a change of government and you want it to be tight, stable and united, you've got to go out there and vote for ACT and National with your party vote to deliver that. And I want to work tightly with National to deliver that.
Let's move on to issue 2, the cost of living crisis, ladies and gentlemen. Post-COVID build back, New Zealand has been plunged into a cost of living crisis created by the urgent need to underwrite the economy during a once-in-a-century pandemic, exacerbated by an explosion of geopolitical frictions and global supply chain meltdowns that are literally importing inflation into the West. Add in the impact of global warming on the agricultural cycle, and we face a future where costs are only driving up. These machinations, however, are cold comfort to voters when week after week we feel the highest food inflation rates for 30 years biting our pockets at the duopoly supermarkets or the petrol oligopoly. Every time you fill up your car or go to the supermarket, you feel mugged. Tāmaki voters said the cost of living crisis was their second most important issue. Brooke, ACT is going to lower the cost of living crisis by slashing red tape and cutting government spending, but isn't cutting the mentally ill and drug addicts off welfare to fund tax cuts for the wealthy just right-wing virtue signalling as opposed to serious social welfare policy?
No, serious policy and serious social welfare policy is looking after all New Zealanders. That is what our social welfare policy does. I think it's important that we have a safety net for people. But what we've got to get really clear on is we've got inflation out of control. Like you were saying, I've been door-knocking people just this morning in Glendowie who were saying, I'm really struggling to pay my mortgage. And there was a guy just this weekend that I door-knocked who nearly broke down in tears. And he said, I know I've got a concern on my mind, but I can't tell you in front of my kids. And we waited for about 10 minutes for his kids to dance away. They were really cute. But he then said, I'm really afraid that I cannot pay my mortgage and I'm going to be having to cut my kids' swimming lessons. You know, people are really, really struggling. They're making so many sacrifices within their own lives, and all that ACT is bringing to the table with this conversation is that we've got to expect the government to do the same. We have to cut back on wasteful government spending because everybody else can recognise that's what you need to do in your own life. Why is it that we've had Kāinga Ora increase the number of bureaucrats by 74% in 3 years when the number of homes has only increased by 7%? You know, we've got to get that inflation under control so people can actually have money in their own pockets.
Follow-up question. You want to drop the top tax rate to 28% and cut $38 billion in taxes over 4 years, which is just economic vandalism. How can you seriously afford your tax cuts without destroying public services?
Well, we've actually had to update those figures, Bomber, because the government's preview came out and it said we have less money than we even thought we did. Our economic forecasts are even worse than we thought we did. So we've now revised that to around $25 billion in cuts. But I'd say it's really important. You know, ACT and National will have to have serious conversations in a future government about how we get wasteful spending under control so that people can have a thriving economy, get rid of the gangs, firstly, but so that we can have a thriving... A thriving economy.
That's Winston arriving on his motorbike.
Oh dear. But look, it is a serious question. We have either two options here. We continue to spend up large, we see inflation continue to increase, we see cost of living continue to increase, and we leave even more debt for the future generation, which I think is fiscally irresponsible. Or we take our heads out of the sand and say, look, we can chart another course. We can actually cut back wasteful spending, increase spending on things like education, justice and health, where it's really important government gets that right, but we allow for more productive work for people.
Damien?
When this government was elected, there was 48,000 public servants, direct public servants. These are people who work for Health New Zealand, Maori Health Authority, Serious Fraud Office, Stats New Zealand. There is now 61,000 of them. David Seymour has talked about cutting a handful of organisations, and that's great. But how serious are you to get those number of public servants down to the 2017 and preferably even lower? Is this something that you would like to do, or is this something that ACT is genuinely committed to?
Oh, we're genuinely committed to it. You know, we see so much unproductive work, and we even have people who work within the public service saying, I can't wait for these cuts to come because I see a lot of people, even within my own industry and my own desk group, who aren't doing anything productive. Why is it that the government keeps spending more and more money, but we're not actually seeing any more value for it? What we want to say is, look, there's actually a lot of people in Tāmaki who pay a lot of tax, they work really hard, and what me and my team want to do is make sure that you get value for money. You know, we have to look at the existing tax pool that we've got, make sure that it's delivering value for everyday New Zealanders, rather than looking at ways that we can find even more revenue to spend unwisely. How do we use our resources that we've got well?
Is it going to be by ballot?
No, I
You
think...
just take the 61,000 and you just allocate them, because that would be, I mean, you have a look at what Elon Musk did at Twitter. What, he cut the workforce down by about 60%, and it's still working. I mean, that was a lovely long answer, Brooke, but I think you need to do it by lot and just send them out the door.
No, what we do want to do is sit down with the chief executives of every government department.
Yeah, craziness.
And actually say...
Simon, National
okay.
will fund a $250 per fortnight tax cut for rich landlords that is funded by robbing from 2-year-olds, mutilating public transport, and literally raiding the climate change funds, all based on revenue from a foreign buyer's tax cut, foreign buyer's tax that no one believes you'll make. How will National ease the cost of living crisis?
Well, I'm not quite convinced we're robbing from 2-year-olds.
It's the ECE, isn't it? You're taking that money from them.
No, actually, there's more commitments around supporting education and ECE. But no, there's two things from National. The first is we've ring-fenced those tax relief, that back pocket boost that we've talked about. Yep, so part of it's around the foreign buyers, part of it's around online gambling, and part of it too is actually turning to a lot of the state services and saying we want to see savings. And really importantly, because it injects in some humanity, is we are saying to the chief executives, exempting the likes of health and education, you guys need to go and find 6% or so savings, and through that process there's going to be projects, idiotic ideas, and then there is going to be some people that also will lose their jobs. So that's ring-fencing that funding there, and then we can continue on the rest of the crowdfunding. So it's well costed, well thought out.
Except you want to keep 98% of Labour's spending.
And so a good point, but we're not actually 98%, but we aren't going out there. We're not out there, so when I'm on the doorsteps, and have been for 12 years, when I tell people that ACT is going to cut food in schools, they're going to cut the winter energy payment, and we keep listing them off, all the issues, they begin to realise there's a little bit of a middle ground. You've got the Labourites who just want to throw all the money about, and you've got those on the right of ACT who just want to cut. It's only National through the middle.
Follow-up question.
Let Brooke respond.
One solution National have mooted for the cost of living crisis is enabling young people to tap into their KiwiSaver to cover bond when moving into a flat. But I know, it's crazy, but seeing as many landlords tend to abuse that fund and get tenants to pay for commercial cleaners out of it, why is robbing your pension to pay for the consequences of an out-of-control rental market an actual cost of living solution for young renters?
Well, I think it's one measure, although I'm slightly worried that your good self with your good left-wing credentials was being cheered on by the ACT Party supporters here as well. It's a bit of a confusing situation.
I didn't understand that either.
No, it's very confusing. We'll talk about it later. But no, we actually think that there's a good opportunity there, and there has been some wider discussion about how we might actually leverage off the use of KiwiSaver. At the end of the day, it's a compulsory tax, if you will, or a compulsory aspect which is forced onto people, that there's some flexibility which helps around renting. And the final point is, there's always bad eggs. There's always bad landlords out there. But actually, I know a lot of locals, and look, I'll admit myself, I'm a landlord. I don't think I'm one of the evil ones. Most of us aren't.
Damien, your rebuttal based on Simon's answer, please.
Well, first a question for Brooke. Are you guys going to cancel the winter energy payment? And if not, why not?
No, what we're going to do is we'll make it really targeted for people who seriously need help. But do you actually think it's right that somebody with
Wait a second. Were you asking a question of Simon?
No. I want to hear from Brooke that they're going to cut the winter energy.
But they're
payment.
not going to.
So middle class New Zealanders like me don't get it. Is that
rich people like you.
Is that what you're doing? You're going to cut the winter energy payment for poor old Simon.
What I think is really important is that we're targeting based on need. I don't think it is actually right that somebody with millions and millions of dollars gets a winter energy supplement.
Okay, all right. So you're gonna mean test it. Okay, all right, Simon. 6.5% is such a milk toast, weak, do nothing policy, sir. That equates to about 4,000 of these 61,000. There are so many words that I could use, but I'm not going to because it's just so disrespectful and would reveal the cold, dead heart that lies inside.
We can see it.
About, that's about 24 months worth of growth. You're not going to balance the books on that, are you? Where does the rest of the spending going to come from? 6.5%. There's been a 27% increase in core underlying costs just on wages. 6.5%, sir, is not going to cut it. What else are you going to do? Or are you, in fact, going to be a continuation of the Robinson years in exactly the same way as John Quay was a continuation of the Cullen years?
Well, a good 4 questions, though. Well, I don't see Quay as a continuation of the Cullen years, and well, good Lord, there is going to be no continuation. Mercy is coming in 11 days' time when Nicola Willis takes over the finance portfolio. We're not...
I thought it was David Seymour. I'm confused.
No, not David Cunliffe. No, but on the other 2 points, 6.5% target reduction, again, not on the likes of health and education or defence. It's a number. We can change that if required. But the second part is, and if I could push back a little bit, on your good self, I don't think we have to have this obsession with wanting to cut New Zealanders' jobs. In fact, people are important. I don't care if they're in the private sector, the public sector, or a politician like myself. They're all people. And this obsession to just go and cut 15,000 jobs is not the way forward. It could be the solution in the end, but we just want to say this is the targeted savings. Look at your programs and your people. The idea of just cutting jobs for the sake of it is not the right way forward.
Can we please just get a close-up of Damien's face as he heard the words public servants are people too? Because I just want to see, I want to see a soul break. I want to see it break. Now, let's move on to issue 3. No. We need to. I mean, look, we've got 4.5 hours of these two, right? So we may as well take our time. As Paul Keating said, I want to do them slow. So
things didn't work out very well for Paul.
Hey, he had 4 good years and an awful lot of French clocks. If you own and you are trying to employ staff in Wellington, it is really, really difficult to do so because the bloated leviathan that is the state is just sucking up everybody with talent, and they are jacking up wages enormously. So honest, hard-working business people, like me obviously, but the honest, hard-working business people are struggling to employ staff. That's why we want those 14,000 workers off the state's payroll and out into the marketplace where they can employ to do something useful.
Yeah. But I think the key is absolutely that's where we want to go. We know that the public service is overcooked, that it is driving up the costs. We've got more consultants than we need to. No one is arguing that. What I'm pointing out is that we give the targets to the chief executives to look right across both the people, the processes and the structures, not with this obsession of just going and cutting 15,000 jobs to make people feel good about themselves.
It's not about making people feel good about themselves. It's about, since 2017, has anybody actually seen any more value for the extra money that's being spent by government?
Well,
nobody has. No one, when I'm on their doorstep, feels like they've had any more value for extra money that's being spent by this government. So we're saying we should be able to walk that back.
Again, I think no one is arguing that there's better value. I mean, the government's spending $1 billion more a week now than it ever did. But again, the whole point is that these are people, there are ways, and that's why National's much more moderate. It's going to the chief executives and saying, actually, these are the targets you need. I just do not understand this obsession with absolutely just wanting to target 15,000 public servants and saying, you're just going to lose your jobs. I think it's heartless. I don't think it's the right way forward.
So can I put something to you then? If you were talking to a chief executive of a private organisation who said, look, I've got around 30 people that I'm paying current wages for, but I don't actually think they're providing any productive value to my company, do you think that they should be forced to continue keeping them?
Well, easy to answer, because I'm someone who's worked both in the private and public sector and have to make those decisions. You do, but it's again a combination. What I'm hearing from yourself and some others is we're just going to target the people. My position is really clear. As someone who's had to hire people and look after substantial budgets, you have to make a decision on wages, on people, on projects, on focus, all across a whole range of areas. That's the way forward, and that's what Christopher Luxon and National are proposing. It's the right way forward.
I love how you all right-wingers seem to think that government agencies are supposed to make fucking money. They're not. Let's move on to issue 3. It was the state of the economy. First-time home buyers are facing interest rates that make them feel frightened and angry and stressed out over possible mortgage sales while the economy bravely splutters along. Low unemployment and high immigration are putting the usual stresses on our already gridlocked infrastructure, and we face global headwinds with geopolitical stress between China and America alongside Ukraine and Russia's impact on global base ingredient production. Tāmaki voters said the economy was the third most important issue. Simon, how does New Zealand steer our economic relationship with China as the geopolitical tensions rise in the South Pacific?
You really want to ask me that one?
Yes. Yeah, that's a good question.
It's an excellent question. So some will know I've been one of the most vocal MPs in Parliament around how we deal with China. I'm the co-chair of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China and deal with MPs and senators around the globe. Really important though, and I find with my dealing with China, because they ring me up frequently and let me know what they think. Look, fundamentally, we need to trade with China. They are an important part of how we drive our economy. But as I often say, free trade also comes with the free expression of ideas. And so when I've talked to Chinese representatives or others, New Zealand must be free to express its views, not only on what's happening in China, but what China does in this country. That's a mature relationship. So we must trade, but we're not going to capitulate our values, and we're not going to be silenced on the human rights abuses which occur in the likes of China or in Hong Kong and other places.
Follow-up question. We are already seeing vast exploitation of migrant workers under a minister who used to be a union boss. How much worse can it get under a National Act government? How will National stop migrant worker exploitation as the economy grows?
Well, help is on its way, because I have absolutely every confidence whoever holds that immigration policy from National will bring a lot of good experience, and that's what you're going to find with just about all our National MPs. We've all got actual experience in life. And secondly, we're going to find that, well, actually, we're not going to make excuses. If you've looked at what Labor's done, they have consistently over 6 years, whatever is going wrong, it's always someone else's fault. We're not going to play that game. We're going to actually address the issues. And again, a lot of us have worked, be it private or public sector. We understand where problems can arise, and we'll address those. I have every confidence in it.
What's the policy? He didn't say it.
So,
Didn't, did he?
So Sir John Quay is wrong in his perpetual détente with Beijing?
John and I would have a different position on the continuum of the China issue, but fundamentally, we agree trade with China is absolutely essential. It's a really important part of who we are. I sit on a side that says that we still have to have robust conversations, because I'm a great believer in human rights. And if there are human rights, there are human rights in New Zealand, Australia, China, India, across the globe.
So what? I mean, I can't be the only New Zealander who is observing that, the postcards, everything else. I agree with your position on China. I agree with it 100%. But when I hear a former Prime Minister of this country and the way he speaks about the Prime Minister of China, who I believe has blood on his hands, I cannot reconcile What is going on there? What is going on there? And is it something, does National need to draw a line in the sand and say, I'm sorry, John, that sort of coddying of that sort of behaviour is just unacceptable. We don't do that anymore.
Well, no is the short answer, because actually I'm also a great fan of free speech, and so everyone's allowed to have their thoughts and opinions, and I'm actually not particularly threatened by it. The great thing, and actually we're illustrating it right here tonight. This is actually, and this is unscripted, but this is actually illustrating it well tonight. The very fact that there's a difference of opinion is actually what is driving part of this conversation, and will lead us here tonight and the New Zealand public to a much better position over time, I believe. We're talking about China a lot more now because of actually the efforts of people like myself and Louisa Wall, Ingrid Leary, and others, and I think it's really important that we do. More conversation.
I think you're doing God's work there, and I commend you for that, sir.
I didn't think this was going to get theological.
But I really struggle with what is happening with our former Prime Minister, and you are right about free speech, but free speech comes with consequences sometimes. And if you say something that is particularly offensive, you will find that there are consequences. And I do not understand why that particular individual has not paid a price. Let's come back to, you were talking about international trade. Where does your party sit? I went to Ireland with the New Zealand Initiative, and it's an excellent organisation I'm sure you're aware of. The big driver there in Ireland, the big driver of the success is foreign direct investment. I'm looking at National Party's excellent 4 or 5 pages on economic policy. I'm not seeing a lot on foreign direct investment. Where do you guys sit on that topic?
Yeah, well, I think you've seen through some of the policy announcements that we understand that New Zealand does need foreign investment to actually go ahead. At the end of the day, the 5 million of us, despite the enormous amounts of tax we pay, cannot fund all the things we want. I mean, you all know it yourselves, those of you who are local here from the National Party, you'll know these are the things which actually people talk to us. They want more hospitals, they want more roads, they want more schools. Sadly, well, not sadly, we just can't fund it ourselves. We're going to ultimately need foreign investment. It's why we're talking about setting up the likes of infrastructure bank and so forth, and why we're wanting to reach out beyond some countries and move towards dealing with the likes of India. Gosh, even think about the likes of the Canadian super funds. There's lots of funds out there.
So why is it, if we identify somebody to come to this beautiful islands, and they say, yep, and I'm here and I'm going to set up a business and I want to own a home, because that's what a lot of people do. They come here, they own a home, and then Chris Luxon says, not so fast. You buy a house here and you're going to be slapped with a 15% tax. That's, yeah, well, I agree. It's better, you know. I mean,
why are you blaming Chippy, you bastard?
But
a man while he's down.
Why not just scrap the thing in its totality? The Overseas Investment Act is a disaster, sir. Why won't your party just commit to throwing it in the bin?
I think because National remains, again, moderate. It's one of the words that I've used a few times tonight. So we don't agree with Labor, of course, that have absolutely shut it down, but we don't feel about actually opening it up completely, which is why we've gone as a $2 million, a 15% tax. And if you want to come here, and you're one of those skilled people with foreign investment and opportunities, I think they'll be more than, I was going to say happy, more than willing.
Thank you, Simon. Brooke, how does New Zealand steer our economic relationship with China as geopolitical tensions rise in the South Pacific? Same question.
Well, look, I think it's really important that we do have a strong relationship with China. They are our strongest trading partner. But I'm also really proud to have been the Member of Parliament that brought the debate about the severe human rights abuses occurring in Xinjiang to Parliament and got cross-party support for that motion. I'm also the Member of Parliament that was happy to accept the Taiwanese government's invitation to join Taiwan this year. I note that Simon O'Connor here was invited but did not accept the invitation. And so I actually think...
make that accusation without context. That was a invitation to all... So I chair the cross-party friendship group effectively with Taiwan. We were all invited, every political party was invited to go, and actually a number couldn't go. I could have, but I made the decision that what needs to happen with Taiwan is a cross-party group.
Let him answer.
What you need is a cross-party group of MPs to go, and maybe this actually sums up the difference between National and ACT. I am prepared to go. I want to go with a cross-party group of all New Zealand MPs, not to go by my selfish self to try and make a cheap statement around the good people of Taiwan.
Well, look, I was also prepared to go as part of the cross-party group. Our tickets were already booked, and then people pulled out. So, look, I think what really struck me, though, from my time in Taiwan was truly understanding the tension between a geopolitical power struggle, but also the importance of trade relationships, because Taiwan's strongest trading partner is actually China. So we do have the ability to trade with each other, but also to have different views. And so what's important for me is that we don't kowtow to China, and we do have freedom of speech within our own country, but we also are realistic about those geopolitical tensions. So I'd like to see us increase our defence spend to 2% of GDP in line with the NATO target. But I would also like to make sure that we have proper overseas direct investment, FDI, from other countries. But for infrastructure projects, we're making a very strong statement that those should be from OECD nations, because I would not like to see our strategic infrastructure in the hands of the Chinese Communist Party.
Follow-up question. On top of killing fair pay agreements, Act will steal a public holiday from Kiwis January the 2nd. Why? Why are you killing my long weekend New Year's buzz, Brooke? Was Roger Douglas right to denounce Act as just a party of the wealthy if you're stealing worker rights?
Oh, Bomber, I wasn't thinking about you when we created this policy. I'm sorry that you get one less day off. But look, being quite serious, what we've done is we've listened to employers who have said it feels like every year we're just getting whacked with another tax and another cost. And this year we saw another public holiday with Matariki. So all we've said is let's readjust the calendar to make sure that employers aren't worse off with added costs.
So you're killing everyone's New Year's. That's what you're doing.
No, it's still an option to be able to take that holiday, but your employer, which I know there will be a lot of people, especially within the area of Tāmaki, who get up every morning, employ other people, who actually want to make sure that they have a business that's sustainable and it's not getting whacked with additional costs by the government every year.
Damien, do you have a question for Captain Buzzkill, who is going to steal my New Year's Eve and screw it up?
You haven't had an honest job in your goddamn life, sir. So how
This
are
is
you
true.
going to suffer
So
from
true.
losing a public holiday?
I know!
Nothing. There makes no difference to your idle life. You just sit there with a cheeseburger in one hand and a bong on the other. What difference is it going to make? None.
I have to sober up early and I'm not happy about it.
Right. Brooke, so foreign direct investment. Is the ACT Party going to take the Overseas Investment Act and put it in a blender and then just zoom it to nothing so the rest of us can get on with our lives?
You've been dreaming about that for a while, haven't you?
I dream about a lot of dark things and I can talk about them on stage.
It's mostly about Adrian Orr resigning. But
Not I want to fire him out of a cannon, but that's another story.
Well, look, I think we have to be serious that, we are a small country and we do need a lot more capital investment in New Zealand. So what we've said is we'd like to amend the Overseas Investment Act to allow for OECD countries to invest within New Zealand up to $100 million without needing the OIO.
$100 million. I've got a
I think it's pretty important. It's essentially what has happened under our new trade agreement with the UK. That's acceptable for companies within the UK. We want to extend that to the OECD.
I got a forestry business. I've got to use that. Okay. Let's talk about tax. Everybody loves tax. National has come under a lot of grief for the way it's attempting to fit its numbers together. ACT is talking about some pretty significant tax cuts. Makes my heart sing. Won't make any difference to Martyn because he doesn't pay tax. Realistically, how are you actually going to cut the expenditure? How are you going to make it work? Because we're seeing an explosion of government debt. We're seeing interest rates rise. How are you going to balance the books? Or are you hoping that National will kind of give you some wriggle room so you don't need to do it?
No, we do want to balance the books because I think it's important that we get our debt under control and we actually make sure that we're getting value for money that people are giving government. What I would like to see happen is we get into government on day one, all of the chief executives are asked, how many people do you employ? What projects are you actually working on? And where you see discrepancies, we should find savings. You think of Kāinga Ora as the example I used earlier. Why on earth have we seen a 74% increase in staff? They don't provide productive value for the number of homes that's been added to Kāinga Ora's books. You can go through every government department and find savings.
What about asset sales? Would you sell in New Zealand? Would you sell the rest of the,
Stop giving her ideas.
Mighty River Power. I mean, why don't we? Would you consider selling the rest of those? I mean, I know it's going to give it's going to give your potential coalition partners an aneurysm, but would you do it?
What I would consider is partial sales so that you end up with 51% still within the Crown's ownership, but you allow for partial sale.
I mean, what have you got left? Landcorp? Everything of any value has been flogged off, with the sole exception of the Reserve Bank.
Well, that's not true. You've still got, Post.
Thank you.
I'll give you $1 for it now.
Quick round question to both of you on the economy. Last night at an Epsom candidates debate in Presbyterian Church in Remuera, moderator Tim Watkins... Shout out for the Presbyterian Church. Odd, but okay.
No,
Tim Watkins asked the candidates, Top, Green, Labour, National and ACT, to put up their hands if they thought it was good that property values have fallen 9%. They all put up their hands, including Seymour and Goldsmith. Curious to know if the Tāmaki candidates feel the same. Brooke, is it good property prices have fallen 9%?
Well, yeah, I do think it is good. I really do. Look, I'm constantly talking to people who are my age. I'm 30, turning 31 the day after the election, so I'm hoping it's a good birthday present. But I'm constantly hearing from people who cannot afford to buy a home. And it's really, really difficult because inflation is going up, and when you've just got money sitting into a savings account and you're just trying to save to buy a home and you see it being frittered away by inflation, it gets really demoralising. So we've got to make sure that young people actually feel like there's a future in this country, a sustainable future where they can have a home, where they can have kids.
Do you think moving the foreign buyers bin will allow external people to come in and speculate in the market and push the prices completely out of the house range of the next generation?
Yeah, well, look, talking to some people in real estate, they've said if you've got a $1.8 million home, I can guarantee you that it would become a $2 million home under National's policy. Yeah. But what I would like to see happen there, because I think this is important, is to make sure that if we are going to allow for foreign investment into residential property, that we get the settings right for building and development too. Because we can't just have one. We've got to make sure there are more homes being built, developed with the infrastructure to support it, so young people can have a future.
So, Brooke, I have a question.
Simon,
we understand currently ACT's policy is you can't build up more than 3 stories in Epsom. Would there be a similar policy brought over here in Tāmaki?
Well, look, the policy for three-story homes is just madness. It's going to lead to chaos. So we have been opposed to what's called the MDRS standards. I'm really proud of that because what I did when this was being debated by Labour and National and passed through Parliament was actually talk to people in building and investment and in council who said you can't just put up homes wherever without having infrastructure to support it. And if you saw what happened with the floods, we don't have the infrastructure for it. So yes, we've got to have more homes. It's got to be with infrastructure.
All right. I think
Simon, is it good?
Did you want to respond to that?
Is it good that property prices are all 9%?
I better answer, and I'll come to really quickly on that one. Yeah, well, look, I talked to the people of Tāmaki, and for 18 months after the National Labour Agreement to go 3 stories to the boundary, quietly and gently, which is my nature, lobbied away, and actually pleased to see that National stepped away a few months ago from that MDRS and returned things to the unitary plan, which we as locals fought so very hard for to get set in place in 2016. And that's what effective local representation looks like. And then to your question, even your good self will know with economics there's winners and losers. If you're a house buyer, prices coming down is great, and if you are the homeowner, you want it to go up. So I celebrate with both.
such a politician.
Let's move on to issue 4, and it is climate change, which is funny because ACT and National barely believe climate change is real, and both have worked to prevent any meaningful change for over 20 years now. Here's a question to both of you. National and ACT have a long history of climate denial and pushing against any real reform. In 2016, ACT had on their bloody webpage that it didn't exist, for Christ's sakes. Get back in line. Here's a question to both of you. ACT and National have a long history of climate denial and pushing against any real reform because until this year, catastrophic climate change caused by human pollution was a threat at the end of the century, when the reality is that it's here now. This very day, New Zealand scientists are calling an emergency meeting to discuss the latest research showing the Antarctic ice shelf is melting at a rate that is alarming and unprecedented at a time when temperature, wildfire and flooding are breaching record levels every week. And here's my question to both of you. What if you were actually wrong? What if the scientists are right and we are in fact facing a far more abrupt climate change reality, and that your petty bickering and delaying tactics won't save us? Brooke?
Well, I actually do believe that we have a climate change problem. You know, strange, don't disown me, but I did actually vote Green before I came all the way over to ACT.
We remember.
Yeah. And look, it's because I do want to leave the world a better place. But I studied economics and international trade when I was at university, and that's when I realized that you can actually care about the environment and care about the economy at the same time. And I think ACT actually has the best policy for climate change. We want to have the emissions trading scheme, which caps how much we can emit every year, and we put that in line with our top 5 trading partners, and we reduce over time. What that means is that we do play our part, but we also don't harm the economy. And I'll give you a couple of really good points. You know, the offshore oil and gas exploration ban. If you're an environmentalist, at first that sounds really good, until you realise that all you could do is harm the local economy, lose jobs here, push emissions offshore to a country, we end up producing more with coal to produce the same sorts of things, and you end up increasing global emissions. That's what the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment said. So I think we've got to do things more about investing in science and technology. You think of things like boluses, which can go into a cow's stomach and reduce methane production by 90%. There's so much that we could do to reduce emissions, but it's not through micromanagement.
Well, follow-up question on that. You won't do anything to make the agricultural sector rein in its emissions, and you're cutting back on public transport investment. If you won't regulate agricultural emissions and you won't fund public transport to lower transport emissions, what are you going to do?
Well, what we've said is we want to have the emissions trading scheme, and then we've got to stop preaching this doom and gloom for the next generation, because it's actually causing a lot of anxiety for kids. You think of science and innovation, things like ryegrasses, which could be planted in New Zealand soil, which could reduce methane production by 30%.
Why do you think those scientists are meeting today? Big fits of shits and giggles?
No, what I see as important here, Bomber, is that we don't become people that just say all the right things and we have kindness, but our policies don't work. I'll give you an example that happened this year. The government subsidised New Zealand Steel $140 million for a new electric furnace, but they've just invested $1 billion as a company in a coal-fired one in Australia. So our government, to look good, has subsidised coal burning in Australia. That's what ACT doesn't stand for. We stand for an emissions trading scheme that's simple and it will work.
Damien, your rebuttal?
If I hear one more thing about climate change, I'm going to melt.
I can give you one more.
Climate change.
I am just so bored with climate change. But what I am exercised about, Brooke, what does make me really angry is when I go to the movies. You go to the movies and you buy your popcorn and you buy a Coke. Do you know what they give you in the Coke? They give you a paper straw. Well, listen, I happen to have here some contraband.
You need to go to the Barclay. You need to go to the Barclay and they'll give you a glass of wine.
So what I want to know...
Oh, he's an enabler.
Somebody get the turtles out of here.
they're excellent. No, what I want to know.
What do these go for on the black market, Damien?
You can use that on the Ranfurly Shield.
The turtle. What I want to know. What I want to know from each of you is what are you going to do? Because I buy these straws from Amazon at $2,000.
Such an arsehole. You're such an arsehole, Damien.
It costs you about
You're such an
$150.
arsehole.
And seriously, you want to do it. But what are you going to do to bring back plastic straws? And not just plastic straws. You buy a loaf of bread, the bread's covered in plastic, and you get this stupid cardboard tie. Right? This is what we get of 6 years of socialism. I want to know from both of you what you are going to do to rectify this outrage, because it breaks my heart.
Well, I think what you've really pointed to is all the greenwashing that we've seen by this government. You know, we've seen straws being banned, we've seen ute drivers being told they're evil, bad people, but Tesla owners are great. We see farmers being vilified for actually helping out our economy. We see an awful lot of micromanagement by the Minister for Climate Change, but it's not actual real action on climate change. It's not actually going to do much. So ACT actually says, let's step back. Let's stop micromanagement and telling people that they're bad and good based on their individual activities. Just set a price for carbon and get out of the way. That reduces emissions.
But what about my straws?
Oh, screw you and your bloody straws, you asshole!
You're giving me pseudoephedrine. What about my straws, Brooke? Am I going to get my straws back? It's a yes or no question. Yes or no?
Well, I think, in theory, you should be able to have your plastic straws back.
Somebody save the turtles.
Simon, I want to hear about plastic
Simon,
two short answers. I've got to give him two short answers. So the first is you can come at my expense to the Barclays Cinema or to Silky Otter. We will get a glass of wine. And therefore we do not need straws. Secondly, as the Shadow Minister for Customs, you've made me very worried now about the illegal smuggling of plastic straws into this country along meth. So anyway. Back to you.
Simon, what if National is wrong on climate change and it is in fact far more dangerous than your policy responds to?
Well, first and foremost, we believe climate change is real and we need to address it. And one of the really important distinctions at the moment is to effectively manage what's happening rather than sort of wringing one's hand in that existential crisis. And if it is worse than we think, we will adapt accordingly. And I think you have to do that, if I might, in three really quick ways. One is, as we are in National, we remain committed to the 2050 targets. We're supportive of the zero carbon. We've actually worked cross-party for that, so we're going to keep working. The second is to do local initiatives. So many of you here will cycle. You know the cycleway that goes from Glen Innes to Tāmaki Drive. Working with Desley Simpson, our local council, got the funding to get that started, because actually that's really important. And then the third level is where we take our own responsibility. So first and foremost, government like National will step up. Secondly, as a good local MP, you advocate and get these policies in. And then as a family, and we have a very big family, we make sure we do our part, from recycling to chickens to worm farms and everything else, even bees. If you want to come and see some bees, come and visit us. This is actually that personal responsibility which each and every one of us need to take. And that's what's going to empower your young ones, actually.
Follow-up question. Critics will argue...
Critics will always argue.
I'm as surprised as you are. He mentioned a cycle lane in a positive way. Wow, Jesus. Critics will argue...
I had a lady stop me this morning while I was human hoardings at the top of St Heliers to say thank you very much.
Good for you.
That was very nice of her.
Critics will argue National's close relationship with the trucking industry and agricultural industry mean National will never do right by the climate and will protect the interests of their wealthy donor mates instead. Can National be trusted on climate change?
We can be trusted in climate change, because actually when you look across the depth of experience of my colleagues, we listen to all the industries. And this is one of the things that really worries me at left-wing discussions, is always trying to divide groups up and play them off against one another. We will listen to those who want to talk about the climate and the environment. We'll listen to the trucking industry. We'll listen to the mums and dads. We'll listen to everyone. And we will govern appropriately for all.
And And that's why nothing meaningful has been done on emissions for 20 years. It was first mooted in 2004. We're 20 years on, nothing's been done.
We can go another 20. All right. In the first 100 days, National, if you're fortunate enough to get into office, is going to scrap the Auckland Regional Fuel Tax. No, wait. How many of you people clapping here voted for Wayne Brown? Because I sure as hell did, and I'm going to do it again. Wayne Brown is not very happy about this policy because that's given him 700 million, well, not just him, since 2008, $700 million. Only half of it's been spent, but you know, it's a lot of...
But you can't answer my question by giving...
aren't all we... Because in terms of a user pay tax, that 10 cents is actually going to a mayor who love him or adore him is going to build roads. Why, sir, are you taking money from the only mayor in the country who is actually prepared to do something?
Well, look, first and foremost, they've collected an enormous amount of tax off each and every one of you, and about 300 million of that has not been spent, so I'm not going to have a cry me a river, we don't have enough money when they can't even spend what they've got. And if you're anything like me, you are absolutely sick and tired of all the spending priorities, speed bumps, extra crossings, go down 4 years of Taniwha Street, Elstree ongoing, the mess in behind me here, the removal of our car parks on St Heliers, it goes on and on and on. All those speed bumps on St John's Road, Kipper Road, you name them, outside GI Pack and Save. Do I need to go on? I'm sure, Wayne, if you're listening, prioritise the money better.
Damien, you have a question for Brooke.
No. I don't. The questions I had have already been worked in, but I do have. I'll come back to that. I'll start with you, Mr. O'Connor. We were talking before we started, and you were talking about your favourite philosopher. Well, not your favourite philosopher. You mentioned a number of philosophers, only one of whom I recognised.
This is a great thing about studying philosophy.
Nietzsche?
No, that was not one of the ones.
No.
And you mentioned John Rawls.
John Rawls, yeah.
And John Rawls had a philosophical theory that if you could design the world, you would design it in such a way that you didn't know how you would be if you
The veil of ignorance.
Society. The
original position.
Thank you. So, if you were in that position, sir, what would the universe that you create be like? What would New Zealand look like if you had the opportunity...
Taken an odd turn?
to be the veil of ignorance?
Well, actually, I still want to gain people's votes, so I won't actually give you a long answer. This is why you study philosophy for years. Look, the basic premise of Rawls is that each of us steps back and tries to stand in the shoes of others. And fundamentally, even though that's what I've read philosophy, that's why I've spent all my life trying as best I can to work with those who are most vulnerable and helpless, be it the homeless and the prisons. And ultimately trying to speak up for the rights of all. And, you know, one of the things is I don't think I don't think any of us could prescribe what the exact vision is, but I'll give you one thing I think this country needs, is to stop the rampant division which just continues in this society. It's a vision where all of us actually look initially at the common humanity which all of us have, rather than being divided so much.
All right, so, and
that's
Brooke,
not even a thesis.
Question for Brooke.
So,
we're running out of time. Question for Brooke.
You are the only economist currently in Parliament. I think that is... That's not a controversial statement. That is not a controversial statement. Okay, she has an economist degree. God, so people are so excited.
I think some people just don't like anything.
Who, Brooke? Who of the economists that you studied, which was the one that had the most lasting impact on you, and why wasn't it F.A. Hayek?
Actually, my favourite economist, this may shock you, is Milton Friedman.
Boo! Boo hiss! Boo hiss!
You're a pickety
And
man.
he's got a really great little saying. It makes it very easy. He says there's no such thing as a free lunch. I think that's really important. Look, you have to admit that we have a social safety net, and you're talking about what sort of society would we like to live in. I would like to live in a society where every kid is loved. Every kid has parents that love them. Every kid has great opportunity through a great education to live a fulfilling life, where it doesn't matter what gender you are, what ethnicity you are, what sexuality you are. It doesn't matter when you or your family came to this country. Everybody knows that they're equal. And in every classroom, every kid knows that their characteristics, who they are as in their actions, is more important than their ethnicity or their gender.
Milton Friedman's remix.
No, but going back, I just wanted to get that out there because you weren't going to ask me that. But importantly, when the government takes your money, that you're actually getting value for it. It's not being frittered away.
That's wonderful, Brooke. Sounds like Hunger Games on a diet. Okay, thank you, candidates. We must now wrap with our final word on the direction of New Zealand. In the polling, 76% of Tāmaki voters believe the country is moving in the wrong direction. We have 25,000 people on the social housing wait list. We spend $1 million a day keeping beneficiaries in unsafe motels. We have massive truancy problems in our schools. 12% of children in New Zealand live in low-income households. 55% of Kiwis are struggling financially. Home ownership is at its lowest rate in 70 years. We are facing the worst food inflation in 30 years. 100,000 Kiwis face homelessness and the planet is melting. Candidates, you each have 60 seconds to answer where you think the country is going and how voting for you and your party will impact the direction from the National Party. Simon O'Connor, your time starts now.
Well, your first opportunity is to get rid of that litany of woe by voting out this government, and there is only one way. There is only one way to do it, and that is to party vote National. If you want a strong, stable government, you only have to party vote National. That is the absolute and critical key. And then the fundamental thing locally is you need a national MP in a national government to be around that table. And only in my good and clearly humble self at the moment, Bomber, is ultimately, as I've kept coming to, you need someone who has actually an enormous amount of experience and has literally every day served people and done all we can to help them. Real experience across a whole range of issues, and why ultimately I'm a local with my wonderful wife, with my family, and those chickens, bees, worm farms and everything else that is proud to call Tāmaki home and who looks forward in 11 days to remaining the MP of this amazing electorate.
Thank you, Simon. From the ACT Party, Brooke van Velden, your time starts now.
Look, people in our community feel like we're more divided than ever. There's more lawlessness and costs are higher than ever. But we can have hope. I want to see a change of government. I think New Zealand needs a change of government. It needs to be an ACT national government, the two parties working closely together, and I want to work closely with National. But you can have a change of government and a change locally for a stronger local voice that's a bit fresher, a bit more vibrant. Woo. And there's no harm in having a little bit more pink too.
All right, before Bobber takes it away, I would just like to thank the Taxpayers Union for putting this all together. I would like to thank, but most importantly, Martyn Bradbury. If I can have a round of applause to Martyn.
My details are on Tinder.
Martyn has done a lot of the heavy lifting here, and he's helped me look good, which takes a lot of work. And finally, I'd also like a round of applause for our two candidates. I think you've done a fantastic job. Martyn.
Comrades, that's the show. Thank you for tuning into this most important of civic duties, which is the vote. Our thanks to all the candidates, Gravity Credit Management, the Daily Blog, the Working Group, the Taxpayers Union, Courier Polling, Slipstream Media and Juice TV Freeview 200 for bringing this evening's debate to the live stream masses. We will see you Tuesday next week at 7:30 p.m. for our working group podcast live from our new MediaWorks studios, where we are inviting Chris Hipkins and Chris Luxon onto the show.
Come on, guys! Come on!
They haven't said yes, but we're inviting them anyway. From the palatial Good George on Tāmaki Drive for the mighty Tāmaki, kia ora and ka pai, New Zealand. You stay classy, Aotearoa. Thank you! Do what we can, sir. Do what we can. Yeah. Really, really impressed with your performance tonight.
Hey, I used to be one of them, right? Would you mind taking a photo? This is the election I used to listen to when I was 14 years old. It saved a lot of young people at that radio station.
That's not my shoulder. I was just saying, if you look for more hits on that comment. Very, really good. Really, really good. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, good. Thank you. But they're a lot of fun to put together and a lot of fun to conduct. Oh, really? Well, I think that this one in some ways was the most entertaining because there was just the two of them. You could get